Hello, I'm being hunted by the local authorities, but I'm wearing a fake real moustache over my real fake moustache, so I think I've got 'em fooled. Crash Bandicoot's racing games are full of racetracks? I accidentally put a question mark there. That was meant to be a statement. But I'm a one-take wonder. The first attempt is always the best attempt. I reckon the vast majority of Crash Bandicoot I reckon the vast majority of Crash Bandicoot racetracks are actually really good. At worst, they're just okay. Unless they're from Tag Team Racing, in which case, they're offensively bad. I talked about the worst tracks in the series, and all of Tag Team Racing's tracks tied for first, which meant that I, rather unfairly, implied that a handful of the series' good tracks were bad. I also talked about the best tracks in the series, and it was hard to pick a winner, but eventually settled on Polar Pass. With the best and the worst, it means we have a spectrum, and every spectrum has a center. What are the most average racetracks in the Crash Bandicoot series? I accidentally put a full stop there. That was meant to be a question. And it's a question that no one is asking. But fear not, I have the answers you don't seek. And here they are. At number 10, we have Dragon Mines. Dragon Mines is a very unpopular track for reasons I can understand. The mining sector causes a lot of damage to the environment and leads to a lot of destruction of habitats as well as lots of pollution. But the thing that people really hate about Dragon Mines is the corkscrew turn, and fair enough. It can be quite a tricky turn to navigate without completely fucking up and ruining your pace. If you know the right techniques, you can get through it unscathed, but it's a very mean piece of track, especially for those people who are shit. There is an alternative option, you can instead follow the minecart tracks, but I find that this is even harder. It's a very tight gap, and once you're in, unless you've built up an insane amount of speed, it's slow. The terrain is very unforgiving, and it's not unlikely that you'll get run over by a minecart or just botch your jump back onto the main course. This little section is the bane of every racer's existence. Even when you're racing on a completely unrelated track, you could be having the time of your life on Sewer Speedway but think, man, that fucking corkscrew turn. But the thing is, that's such a small part of the course. Dragon Mines has more in it, and it's actually not a bad track, especially in Nitro Fueled where it's filled with treasure and even a dragon, one you'll recognize if you've seen it before. It's also got decent music. It does feel a bit hokey, but it fits the setting. Dragon Mines gets a lot of hate when really, it's pretty okay. At number 9, we have Tiger Temple. Tiger Temple is a track I actually really like, mainly for its atmosphere. I'm a man who loves a thunderstorm. I love the booming and the crashing, surrounded by the constant sound of pelting rain. Anything to block out the voices in my head. This extreme weather suits the mysterious location and setting of Tiger Temple. It feels very adventurous and alive. It is also a unique track in that it sports a unique shortcut, one that can only be accessed by chucking an item at it. This doesn't work in real life, you can't open doors like that. If you threw a bomb at a door, you'd probably get arrested, but in this temple you are rewarded with a handy shortcut. It's a cool feature, but that really is Tiger Temple's only feature. The rest of the track is mainly small jumps and hills that are too big to allow for smooth driving, but too small to get any meaningful height or advantage when you jump from them. There are some ramps that are fun and useful, and the little bit inside the temple is cool as well. After a ride out in a thunderstorm, it would be nice to warm back up with the gentle, comforting heat of a flamethrower. But that's kind of it. Tiger Temple is a cool track, but it isn't much of a showstopper, just a neat little blip on the radar of satisfaction. In other words, it's an average track. In keeping with the Tiger theme and the Temple theme, at number 8 we have Tiny Temple. Tiny Temple isn't actually all too different from Tiger Temple. Let's get the obvious similarities out of the way. They're both temples built in honor of a tiger. For Tiger Temple, that's Pura, even though the name implies that any old tiger will do. For Tiny Temple, it's tiny, made obvious by the enormous tiny statue. They also have similar environments, being temples surrounded by jungles and greenery. They even both have interior sections where you can get incinerated by flamethrowers, making them both very popular tourist destinations. But it's in the track design itself where they differ. Tiger Temple is a shorter track with its only notable feature being an item-based shortcut. Tiny Temple doesn't have that. In fact, it doesn't really have any notable features at all. It has a Nitro Kart trademarked anti-gravity section, but it's very brief and has nothing on it, to the point where I'd say Nitro Fuel's version with its flat path and cheeky shortcut are way better. Nitro Fuel's Tiny Temple also has Sacred Fire, which provides an opportunity for adrenaline on this otherwise not very exciting course. Nitro Fuel did make it more interesting with Sacred Fire, and it is a lot longer of a track than Tiger Temple, so it's a good playground for it, but overall the track really isn't that bombastic. Tiny Temple doesn't do anything wrong, but it also doesn't do much to impress, making it a solid average. Speaking of tracks that have Tiny's face plastered all over them, at number 7 we have Tiny Arena. Tiny Arena is an absolute behemoth of a racetrack, one of the longest in the series, beaten only by Electron Avenue if I'm not mistaken, and last time I checked, I am not mistaken. I would be Mr. Taken. Tiny Arena is huge, and it takes a while to just complete your 3 laps, especially because it lacks any shortcuts and any sacred fire. And I think its length becomes a problem precisely because it lacks shortcuts and sacred fire. There is nothing you can do to shave off time here, you just have to put your head down and take it, and if there's too much length, that could be painful. Tiny Arena has a lot of turns, a lot of small jumps, and a lot of mud that will slow you down if you get caught in it. There are boost pads, so there are opportunities to speed things up, but they won't make it all fly by. It's a very slow track to race on, almost like some kind of endurance race where the goal isn't to be the fastest, but the best at holding out until the end. It's a marathon on wheels. I'm alright with long tracks, but Tiny Arena just doesn't have anything on it to warrant it being as long as it is. It's a fairly one-note track. Electron Avenue is also a long track, but it's filled with hazards and sacred fire and shortcuts and all sorts, making it extremely fun to race on. Take all that away and you've got Tiny Arena. I do like the idea of this sort of extreme sports stadium with a giant tiny statue looming over it, but as for the racing itself, it's missing a little something. Hence, average. But enough about temples and temples about tigers. At number 6 we have Android Alley. Android Alley I actually think is a pretty neat track. It has 2 main standout features. The first is the train. There's a train that periodically trains along the train tracks, running over and obliterating any racer that gets caught in its path. This is actually a cool idea for a hazard. Who doesn't like getting hit by a train? The other main standout feature is the shortcut, which from a racing perspective isn't anything mind-blowing, but the simple action of shattering the windows to get through on the first lap is just glorious. Besides that though, Android Alley doesn't really have anything worth mentioning. It's got an anti-gravity section with nothing on it, which is neat I suppose, but in the nitro-fueled version it was changed to just a really long turn with nothing on it. The shortcut becomes boring in the second and third laps because you can't shatter the windows anymore, and getting hit by a train is only fun the first time, as many victims will tell you if they're still alive. Presentation-wise, it's decent with its whole futuristic city vibe, but it's totally eclipsed by Electron Avenue, which in both versions is way cooler. Android Alley is one of those tracks that's more fun in your head than it is in reality. It's by no means bad, and it has some cool things to offer. It's leaning above average, but it's still very much average. It's time to leave the Crash Bandicoot universe for a bit with the number 5 spot, Spyro Circuit. Spyro Circuit is a cool track. This is the best crossover between the Bandicoot and Dragon there has ever been. Not that there's stiff competition. That alone makes Spyro Circuit a winner in my books. It's just a shame that the track itself isn't really all that. Like, it's fine enough, but it's not one of those tracks that really blows you away. It borrows the teleportation idea from Hyperspaceway, dividing the track into separate sections, each with a different theme that references levels from the original Spyro game. And that's fucking cool. There are also details like Aku Aku, Uka Uka and Velomas being replaced with sparks, crates being replaced with chests, and Wumpa Fruit being replaced with gems. It's genius, perfect, no complaints. As far as presentation is concerned, it's a home run. But the actual track itself, I don't know. There isn't a whole lot going on. A lot of it is very basic turns and jumps. There aren't really any shortcuts besides cutting over a few corners, the hazards are kinda weak. It's a very calm track, which I guess makes sense as Spyro is a very calm series most of the time, but this is a racetrack. Where are the wizards manipulating the ground? Where are the soldiers firing cannons? And where are the references to Spyro's 2 and 3? The rest of the series I'm not fussed about, who gives a shit about that? But why is everything taken from the first game only? I feel like Spyro Circuit had a lot of potential, and it only kinda lived up to it. But lucky for this list, only kinda is a synonym for average, so it fits right in. Directly after Spyro Circuit in both the Grand Prix track order and this list is our number 4 spot, Nahas Nightmare. Nahas Nightmare actually has a lot in common with Spyro Circuit when you really think about it. And trust me, I've thought about it. Besides both being bonus tracks in Nitro Fueled, they both have this air of missed potential about them. Nahas Nightmare is a cool track, don't get me wrong. I love the spooky scenery of the fields and the forest and all that. It's great. But why in the ever-loving fuck was this not an Academy of Evil track? That's literally Nina's whole thing, being a student at the Academy of Evil. She had a whole level exclusively about that. The closest we get to that in this track is a portrait hanging on the wall of this weirdly well-decorated house thing. I guess it kinda resembles the Academy of Evil, but the Academy is massive and this building is just a small room. I feel like it could have been so much more. It's an even greater wasted opportunity than Spyro Circuit, but I feel that Nahas Nightmare makes up for it somewhat with its track design. It's got Sacred Fire, that's always a bonus. It's got a couple of shortcuts, one of which is really good, the other of which is completely useless to the point that a lot of people probably don't even know it's there. It's got this giant spider thing that attacks racers, and this green pumpkin slime that slows you down. Nahas Nightmare is a decent track, but like Spyro Circuit, I can't help but think about what could have been. What is average. Back to the classics now with our big bronze baby, Blizzard Bluff. Blizzard Bluff isn't big at all actually. It's quite a small track, but it manages to pack a lot into its short length. It's aspirational stuff for everyone with a small penis. Blizzard Bluff has 3 shortcuts in it. It only takes about a minute and a half to finish 3 laps, but it still manages to have 3 shortcuts in it. You hear that, tiny arena? The first is right at the beginning, but it's only really worth taking if you've built up speed already. The second is the big jump over the river, which I am very inconsistent with. Sometimes you make it, sometimes you don't, and I don't know what I'm doing to cause either one. The third is the hop over the fence, which can be really hard to pull off even if you have built up speed. But it's so worth it if you can manage to make it. But that's the thing about Blizzard Bluff. Shortcuts are all it has. Without them, what even is it? It's fairly generic beyond the shortcuts. Like, yeah, it has a boulder and a few patches of ice, and it looks like a nice ice track, but it's nothing when sat next to Polar Pass. Polar Pass makes Blizzard Bluff look like a chump. Blizzard Bluff is pretty good for what it is, a small course with some fun shortcuts, and in isolation I can't complain. But when you see what other courses do, it makes Blizzard Bluff look a bit weak in comparison, giving off the vibe of average. Our runner-up is none other than Crash Cove. Crash Cove is probably the most iconic racetrack in all of Crash Bandicoot racing history. It's the first one. That already makes it super special. Surely it can't be average. But just think about it for a second. Take away all that iconic stuff and all the external context and look at it for what it is. Can you really look at Crash Cove and say with confidence that it's a fantastic course? I mean, it is by default because it's not in tag team racing, but is Crash Cove really worth all that hype? The most interesting thing about Crash Cove is its small grassy ledge shortcut just after the pond. That's basically it. The rest of the track is almost entirely flat, and I know what you're thinking, what about the pirate ships? One of them is a shortcut. No, it's fucking not. Taking that pirate ship jump takes longer than just turning the corner normally. You're losing time by taking that route, and the other pirate ship doesn't even have anything on it. There's no reason to go over there. Look, I like Crash Cove. I like the setting, I like the way it's presented, it's an iconic track. But come on, there are so many tracks that are more interesting to race on than this one. It's only fair to say that Crash Cove is a very average track. We're reaching the end, but before we do that, I have to follow the tradition I've forced myself into and do some honourable mentions. I've done it every time so far, and I can't stop now. So here are some honourable mentions, some tracks that aren't average enough to make the list. Thunderstruck. This is a really unique course from Nitro Kart, named after that very famous song by the band Queen. I love thunderstorms, so this track is right up my alley, and it has some cool features, particularly the many hazards that block your path. I think it's a track that's too cool to be considered average. Twilight Tour. It was the first of the Grand Prix tracks in Nitro Fueled, and while it didn't blow me away at the time, it has grown on me. I love the thematic switch between night and daytime, even though it doesn't make sense from a scientific perspective, and the environment looks really cool. It's also a track that's fun to maintain Sacred Fire on. It could use a bit more to make it a more memorable track, but it's still a good one, so I can't in good conscience call it average. Cortex Castle. This is a course that's not so fun to maintain Sacred Fire on, but it feels good if you can pull it off. Cortex Castle is actually one of the more difficult tracks because of how angular and corner focused it is, resulting in some tricky turns, but with its shortcuts and overall theme, it's obvious that it's another one of the good ones and above what I've been calling average. And finally, the moment you haven't been waiting for, the most average Crash Bandicoot racetrack is Inferno Island. Inferno Island is without a doubt the most average track in the series, and it makes sense. It takes the second most average track in the series, Crash Cove, copies it, but forgets to be as iconic. It's the same thing, just less memorable and less beloved. And it really is uncanny how similar they are. They are both beach-based tracks that are largely very flat, with a couple of jumps here and there, They both have a shortcut based on a small grassy ledge, and they both have a long cut that involves climbing a thematically fitting ramp, leading to a big jump that leaves you further behind than if you had just taken the turn normally. They are one and the same. Inferno Island just has the disadvantage of being Nitro Kart's version of it, and when Nitro Kart copies something, it always ends up being slightly worse than what it was copying. Inferno Island is literally the embodiment of average, being perfectly just okay. It's almost impressive how it's as equally not good as it is not bad. I will say that Inferno Island does get a bonus point for its nitro-fueled makeover, which helps it contrast heavily with its original form in Nitro Kart, making it more memorable, but because I don't make these rankings using a point-based system, that bonus point is irrelevant. And so is Inferno Island, the most average racetrack in Crash Bandicoot. And there we have it, the top 10 most average Crash Bandicoot racetracks. What a very plain and ordinary journey it's been. I am very happy. Not because I have named Inferno Island the most average track in the series, but because I can finally reveal the truth. The best Crash Bandicoot racetracks, the worst Crash Bandicoot racetracks, the most average Crash Bandicoot racetracks. This trilogy was all a ruse. It was never about those tracks, because when you look closely at the 1 through 10 and honorable mentions of each, you'll see that there is exactly one track that has never made an appearance in any capacity. And that track is Engine Labs. It was my plan all along, not to talk about all the other tracks in the series, but specifically to never talk about Engine Labs. You will never hear what I think about this track, not in a million years, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. You'll never take me alive!